the biggest thing holding companies back right now is not what they know, but what they're still missing. In a market this dynamic, blind spots can get expensive fast, but they can also point to where the next real opportunities are if you know how to read the signals. Some of the biggest opportunities in commercial vehicles right now are hiding in the places companies are still overlooking. That might be in the data, in buyer behavior, in operational realities, or risks like cybersecurity that too often get treated as tomorrow's problem until they become today's crisis. So that's really what this conversation is about. How do we get better at seeing what matters sooner and turning those blind spots into smarter business decisions and ultimately business opportunities? Welcome, everyone. I'm Lauren Fletcher, Vice President of Content at Bobit Business Media and lead editor of Work Truck. And I am so excited to moderate this conversation, connecting data, buyers, and business opportunities. I'm joined today by three fantastic panelists who each bring a different lens to what's happening in the market right now. Dania Spencer brings the research and intelligence perspective. Candy McCollum brings marketplace and buyer behavior insights. And Nicole Ward brings the industry and leadership perspective from what trucking and logistics businesses are living every day. So now I'm going to take a breath and take a quick moment and let them introduce themselves. So Dania, let's start with you.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm Dania Spencer with Escalent. I'm a strategic advisor to our Fleet Advisory Hub, which is a dedicated community of about 12,000 commercial vehicle and fleet decision makers, representing over 1 million vehicles. We engage with these folks on a regular and frequent basis, usually a couple times a month, on a variety of topics, but we kind of emphasize and focus on emerging technologies. So it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to sharing some insights with you today.
Thanks. And Candy, what about you?
I'm Candy, the Business Development Manager with Comvoy. We're a national marketplace for work-ready and data-ready inventory. And as a catalyst for market intelligence, we unify that fragmented data to align with availability, with demand, and satisfy the requirements of today's buyers.
And Nicole.
Hello. Thank you for having us. So, Nicole Ward, President and founder of African American Women Trucking Association, also known as AAWTA, where we support the industry when it comes down to education, resources, technology, and advocacy. Excited to be here so that we're able to make sure that we're broaden the horizons, educate everyone, and make sure that they're in the game. This is how you stay alive in trucking and logistics. And so we're excited to be here.
So we're going to leave some time for audience questions at the end. So we really do hope you drop some of those throughout the session because we do want to make this as interactive as possible. So if at any point in time you've got something for us, make sure you drop it in. But first, I want to start with a question that I think really gets to the heart of this whole conversation. We're going to start with what you guys are seeing right now. What is one signal you're seeing in the commercial vehicle market right now that others might be underestimating? And Dania, I'm going to throw this your way first.
Oh, thanks, Lauren. So I think there's potential for the industry to underestimate the power of data. And what do I mean by that? Well, data has the power or the ability to enable or to paralyze decision making. If you have too little data, then you can't hear that signal and you don't know where to focus. Too much data and it's deafening, you start drowning in the data. In both of those scenarios, too little or too much data leads to inaction. And I think it's really easy to underestimate the process involved in fine-tuning and finding that balance between too much, too little data to enable confident and efficient decision making.
So it's really a balance then between those two things. I think, with so much else in commercial vehicle business that you have to be aware of is that very fine-tuned balance between, like you said, too much and too little.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not easy.
Oh, definitely not. Candy, what about you? What's something that you're seeing that's really being underestimated?
I think it's a balance, like you said. But I think it's buyers are cross-shopping maybe categories, vocations now, like the capabilities and systems data that we have and operating on today often fail to recognize intent. So if your plumber's looking for a vehicle, right? If you just have service body tag, or someone's just putting service bodies towards that vocation, you're missing out on the cargo van with shelving, right? It's the intent for the vocation. And I really think that there's a lot of intelligent gap there with the data, and we should probably focus more on I think we've heard it for the last 2 days, the use case, the job.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, intent is something that I'm hearing a lot too on even the, content production side of everything. Is everybody really is looking at, what is the intent of the readers and what are they really needing to use those jobs? And I don't think it's anything new. It's always been what's the tool of the job and what's it being used for, but it's definitely being so much more of a focus now to ensure that that tool is sharpened, I think, to do that job that it needs to be doing effectively.
And I think just one little thing to add to that, I think with people using AI a lot in their own personal use, right? So that's helping them solve problems versus where I think before in the marketplace, maybe we just relied on keywords.
No, I think that's a really good point. And I think also comes with a little bit of maybe a cautionary tale. I think that it is definitely being used a lot, but it's still not quite as good as the prompts and the data that's being put into it. So ensuring that it's being used effectively and perhaps working with the right partners who understand how to use those tools and analyze that data so that you don't end up with, as Dania was saying, way too much to try to now figure out kind of how to navigate through. It's definitely a journey. Nicole, what about you? What are you seeing that others might be underestimating?
Well, as the founder of a trucking association, 80% of our members are some form of owner operator or in the operational side of the commercial motor vehicle space. When it was mentioned that data is what we should be using to grow, I'm seeing that a lot of our members are scared to implement technology or not using data to make decisions for what's next for their business, what's next for their employees, if they should even bring in a new vehicle into their fleet. They don't know how. So I love having these conversations where we're able to pinpoint and highlight the importance of, like we were talking about, data and why it's being used, the importance of implementing it into your operations and using that to drive what's next within your organization.
I think, that leads really well to the next one. Everybody talks about being data driven, including us in this conversation, but it can mean a lot of different things depending on who you ask and who you speak to and how they use it. What does it actually look like in practice when it's being done well? Candy, let's start with you.
I think it's the perfect match of the business intelligence and the human intelligence. So maybe a spreadsheet or business intelligence can tell you what is happening, like 53% of the industries testing AI tools, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's the human intelligence that tells you the why it matters for you or why it matters for your specific region or your specific zip code. And, from a marketplace standpoint, business intelligence might show a spike in a certain body in the month of January. And if you're a data only company, then you're just going to buy more of that truck, right? But as an intelligent leader, you look at and you realize, okay, well, what's happening? If this is my area, what's happening here that could contribute to this, or can I get ahead of this? And you just use that human intelligence and combine data with context, and that just helps you be more efficient, more profitable. You're not just reacting to a spreadsheet. You're out maneuvering the market.
Yeah, it comes back to balance again of taking those two different things and being able to make sure that you're not going too far one direction and able to benefit and use the tool as well, and not just only depend on human intelligence and spreadsheets and paperwork, but the data behind it. Nicole, what about you? What do you think it actually looks like in practice when it's being done well?
Well, the first thing I like to say is numbers don't lie, right? So using data is going to help me take the emotion away from it, make a finite decision that's going to help us move forward, move the needle, and identify trends, right? So when we're talking about trucking, logistics, and supply chain trends, identifying trends are important. And we're able to see that by looking at data sets or using AI to help us identify things that we're looking for those of us that are not familiar with maneuvering through data sets to use them to identify what's next for our organization, or if we need to, grow or bring another truck based on the season or whatever the case may be. But using that or understanding how we can incorporate the two AI into data sets and using that to manipulate what we're looking for will really win on the background is what I think.
So I'm seeing a connected line there too. I think, you're saying with the amount of data that you have, you can really make these smarter decisions. And as Candy pointed out, if you only look at perhaps one point of data, you might be making the wrong decision. So really making sure you're looking at the right data points for each thing, not just the one that might be maybe the most obvious or logical, and perhaps and even being able to lean on AI sometimes to ask, what else should I be looking at to make these better, smarter decisions?
That's correct. Love that.
Awesome. Dania, what would you have to add to this?
Well, I can definitely build upon what Candy and Nicole shared. Stealing words from one of our Fleet Advisory Hub members, because I think it's just perfect. What does data analysis look like when it's done well? Objective analysis, right? Objective analysis. So we are to the point where we don't have to rely on subjectivity. We don't have to rely on a single spreadsheet. We are in a point in the industry with connected vehicle data and integration that we truly can benefit from a data ecosystem, right? So we have progressed past gut instinct. We have progressed past, well, we've always done it that way. We have good, solid, high integrity data to enable confident decision making. And something that Catherine actually talked about in her opening presentation yesterday, she talked about there's so much data in the industry, and unfortunately, it's all siloed. So to take data analysis to the next level and to really drive that business performance and those business outcomes that we all desire, it's about integration. And I think that's what Nicole was talking about. That's what Catherine was talking about. It's about connecting, connected vehicle telematics data with business data. You've got external data sources. If you're talking about, upfit data, trends, you certainly have economic data. This is kind of like ideal situation, but integration is the key to optimization. And we as an industry, we are moving forward to breaking down those data silos. It's not easy. It's like perfect scenario, but we're talking about it and people are sensitive to the value of this integration. And we, just as Catherine said yesterday, we will get there, but done well, it's objective and it's integrated.
I love it.
I would like to add,
It's nice.
I love that outcome. When you're talking about business outcomes, and integration, I wanted to highlight that being one of the obstacles and barriers when it comes down to my community, in the trucking community, right? When you're talking about integration, that means your systems are talking to one another. And so a lot of us in, some of the smaller organizations or ones that are looking to scale, they have to understand how important that is. Your systems talking to one another integration. So that if you're looking for a certain level of business outcome, that's the way to actually get results, to be able to get what you're looking for and a great output. So thank you for actually mentioning that, because that's a big deal. I see a lot of businesses and they're looking to grow, and they're like, man, we don't know how to utilize the data that we have because it's all over the place. It's in all kind of systems. You're using so many different things. How do we, let's talk about integration. Let's talk about our systems marrying one another so that we can get great results.
I love it. So we've got balance and we've got integration as two of kind of our key phrases that we've got so far. And I think too, I think we need to identify a new list of automotive and automotive business related curse words. Downtime has been kind of on that for a while, but we've always done it that way. I think that phrase has got to be something that is just banned as we move forward. There's just too much at stake from not moving and looking at options and just growth, I think, as we go forward. Okay, so let's stay on the ideas of signals for a second, but shift to the buyer side a bit. What are buyers doing today that tells us something important about where the market is moving? Nicole, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I could tell you, when it comes down to our industry, we're seeing buyers making the decision to increase their fleets based on the market, right? And which is what they should do, in addition to using their data, since we have to bring that one back in. They are looking at that, and unfortunately, they have slowed down with increasing and buying based on them looking at the market and them using that as a justification on growth or not. Would love to see that them using exactly what we're saying, data. We shouldn't go off of how we feel. We could look out the window and one minute it could be cold and the next minute it could be hot. And that's okay. That's just how it goes. Everything goes up and it goes down in this industry. Again, we should be using tools that are helping us make solid decision making. And that's what I would love to see more in my community versus them using that good old, I've been in this industry for a long time and I know how to make a decision based on how I feel.
And where do you think, is it an access? Is it an understanding or an education? What's holding it back from being able to utilize these tools?
Yep. The barrier, I think, to entry is education and access. Most people are used to, doing things the way that they've been doing it for 20, 30 years. The industry's changed. Technology is now involved. We have AI. We have so many resources and tools that are able to help us progress, help us scale, help us make, like you said, business decisions, make better business, create an outcome, make it more predictable. But we're not utilizing those things. And I think there's this idea in a lot of the good old boys in her head, like, I don't need it. It's hard. It's going to take me too much time to learn, which is why as associations, we think that it's so important to make sure that we're able to offer the education, able to bring the partners in that are able to provide the technology, the resources, the tools that you're able to implement into your business to make better business decisions and have a solid business outcome.
I mean, you can look back not too far to typewriters to computers. How many people were afraid to really make that shift for very similar reasons, but can guarantee that they're not still using typewriters to keep track of their, hopefully their fleet operations anymore. But Dana, what would you add to that? What do you see buyers doing that's really telling us something important about where the market's moving?
We're seeing a growing interest in a handful of telematics features. So we conduct a survey last year and this year asking, interest in whole battery features associated with telematics. And we're seeing a handful, a couple related to safety, a couple related to convenience, and a couple kind of related to business admin. And we're seeing this year over year growth in interest. And we're looking at geofencing and the emergency incident alert functionality in telematics. So, everyone's safety focus, companies' fleets are committed to safety. So having this incident or emergency services alert functionality, that's kind of, by default, people are interested in that. But the geofencing, seeing more decision makers or fleet professionals interested in geofencing is a little bit interesting. We hear through focus groups or qualitative research that, everyone's struggling with finding talent and retaining employees. And some companies, some fleets are using the ability to take company vehicles home as an employee perk. So as more companies are allowing employees to take vehicles home, the geofencing gives, fleet managers a little bit of a peace of mind of where the vehicle's being driven, if it breaks the geofence boundary. So that was interesting. That kind of explains this with this growing interest. Convenience features typically get deprioritized. So when you think about safety, when you think about the financial aspect, right? More features means more money. Convenience features typically get deprioritized, but we're actually seeing this growing interest in, digital keys, the remote start, the lock, unlock, the digital keys, hands-free messaging. I suppose that could be a safety feature too, but certainly hands-free messaging and mobile apps. So we're seeing a growing interest around that. And then kind of on the back end, functionality that helps with keeping track of regulations and regulatory compliance. So all of that emission kind of stuff, which is a little bit interesting given the shift with EV and such and the softening of the regulations. But regulations aren't going away. And so, you want to get ahead of that. And then finally, vehicle theft assistance functionality, as well as just overall vehicle life cycle planning. So, there's a cost implication to all of this, but fleet managers are trying to get ahead of things. They're seeing the value of it. And there's some growing interest in a handful of these very specific functionalities and capabilities within the telematics kind of ecosystem.
That's really, really interesting, I think. I know fleets are really seeing a lot more of those nuclear verdicts still. That has not gone away. And so doing anything they can to keep their drivers safe is something that's really important from what I've seen in my world. But I think on the retention side, that is really interesting to see some of the other tools and perks and other things coming through. I have also heard quite a bit of the phrase geofencing popping back up again. I've been doing this almost 20 years. When I first started, that was telematics. It was huge, and geofencing was a big topic, and it kind of was just a part of the program for a decade plus. And now I'm really hearing it pop back up again, and that was a great definition of probably why that has been such an increased interest on all of that. So thank you. Candy, what about you? What do you think buyers are doing today that's telling us something important about where the market's moving?
Before I kind of talk about the marketplace, I want to add to the geofencing because I
Yeah.
think that a lot of that has to do with the businesses themselves, right? So you have construction companies and you have utility companies, and they are using that artificial intelligence for their own job bidding, for their own looking at things, and geofencing is a large part of that, right? When you do a work assignment or you bid a job, a lot of that's geofenced out, right? So when they start being more familiar with it and understanding its capabilities, it's easier for them to work into their vehicles. I think it's just something that organically happens, and I'm sure that integration of where the vehicle is, where the job, I'm sure all that probably works together somewhere in the background. But from a marketplace standpoint, I think that we're just seeing the smart transparency being rewarded, right? I know there's a lot of conversation right now about price and how that's starting to affect dealers. But I would say that let's just think of the midnight researcher, right? They don't want just a photo. They want an interactive experience. So if you're looking at a crane truck at 10 p.m., they're going to expect an intelligent system to interact with, whether that's calculate payload requirements, real life financing cycle payments, right? If a dealer just has call for details button, they're pretty much relying on the 90s logic, and dealer B, who uses smart tools and gives information that's transparent, and is able to answer questions, they instantly already won the sale before dealer A even wakes up. So I think it's about giving them all the information. They'll choose how much of that they want to interact with, whatever level of comfort that they have. But I do think the expectation there from the buyer is transparency.
That's really interesting. I think, for a long time it was, do you have a website? At least have a website to, go find.
Exactly right.
And now that need to have that interactivity and that, ability to have just more than, like you said, a picture, is really going a long way. I think, video, as well as artificial intelligence is a part of that. People are really wanting to hear and see more than just a static image on a page to get the information that they might need.
Yes.
Okay, so we, briefly touched a little bit earlier on smaller operators, and I think this is something I hear come up a lot, especially from smaller operators. Is the playing field actually starting to level for the smaller fleets when it comes to access to data and tools, or are they still kind of being left behind? Dania, let's start here with you.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to share that we are at least around telematics, because we survey telematics adoption a lot. We've been following this for several years, and finally we're starting to see some momentum for these micro and small fleets. So year over year from 24 to 25, we're seeing almost a 50% increase among companies that are operating micro fleets, so that 1 to 5 vehicles, in their adoption of telematics. So our 25 survey, we're showing about 22% of these companies operating a handful of vehicles are adopting telematics. Like I said, that's almost a 50% increase year over year. And small fleets, and we kind of define a small fleet of 60 to 50 vehicles, we're seeing about a 31% increase in adoption of telematics, now up to about 50%. So again, these companies that are operating these small or smaller fleets, about 50% of them have adopted telematics. It's really nice to see. There are a lot of telematics solutions out there. There's a lot of providers out there. So part of this is competition, driving that cost down, making it a little bit more affordable for the small guy. We see in verbatims a lot of times. It's like, pilot with the small guys, make it affordable for the small guys. So we're starting to see that. The connectivity, the data has gotten better. Smaller fleets can see the value. It can be tangible. So it's really nice to see that they're still playing catch up. And of course, the larger fleets tend to be the early adopters. They have the resources, they have the needs. But it's really nice to start seeing, the little guy starting to catch up a little bit.
Nicole, I'm sure you've got something to add on to this one with your experience. What about you? What are you seeing?
Yes, I actually want to. I agree with that. From what I'm seeing, with our members, we have over 7,000 members, and we have, I would say, 50% of them are within that 1 to 5, category of trucks. So the smaller fleets, and so I'm seeing the ones that have more of a willingness to learn, because they want to scale and grow, understand the importance of implementing telematics into their operations. I'm seeing that they're more open to it because it's a more affordable. They're receiving more education on how it can increase their operation, reduce insurance, create. I'm so sorry. Create a better.
But you'll be back in just a second. We promise.
Yeah, that create a better environment within the organization, and also creating retention when drivers are seeing that the carriers care about technology and implementing technology. They're excited about that, is what I'm finding.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. Candy, what about you? What are you seeing?
Well, I do think that it's a leveling field, right? Because it's already been stated here that the smaller fleets don't have the resources, right? And I think that intelligence can act as, maybe for a small business, it can act as a virtual procurement department, right? So you're a woman-owned trucking startup. You can use tools to find needle in a haystack kind of specs that might be 3 states away, and you can execute purchase within minutes, right? So data doesn't always care about the size of your balance sheet. It just cares about the speed of your intelligence.
Yeah, I love that.
No, that's really good. And with the access to more and more tools, and there becomes the access to more and more of that data to be able to make those decisions for more fleets, whether you're small or large. Okay, so let's make sure we bring it back to the theme of the session. When we think about the theme from blind spots to profit centers, what is one blind spot you really believe could become a meaningful opportunity for our viewers right now? Candy, let's throw this one back to you first.
Okay, I'm going to kind of speak mostly to dealers, right? The dealership on the inventory level. I think it's sale inventory, uh, uh, data feed hygiene. I'm not really sure, but we talk about ghost trucks, or the truck that's invisible, all the time, because you have a specialized unit and it's sitting on the lot, but the digital version of that truck's just dumb, right? So it doesn't know that it's been upfitted and all the capabilities that it does have. So I think the profit center here is in taking something. And from being in the dealership, I can say this, that might seem like an IT chore to invest in your data into your feed, right? Um, but do invest in that, right? And build that, make that data as best as it can be. And you're using those high value things like in stock, 40-foot reach, it's EV ready, it's FedEx spec, or any other national approved specs, right? Those things that is important to the end user. I think that, other than, we are a bridge that marries the body to the chassis for a completed unit, right? So that's smart. I just think that there's a lot more that we can uncover here and just make it smarter. Clean, intelligent data, I think, will move metal.
I think the description of the image not knowing it was dumb was probably one of my favorites so far. Dania, what about you? What's a blind spot you believe could become a meaningful opportunity?
Well, I think it's related to AI and in this way. So again, we survey our FAH members frequently, as I said, and we've been asking them about AI for a handful of years now, and we asked them about their views of AI, and consistently, even today, it hasn't changed much. About 50% of our members are saying AI has a place in certain situations. So this is not a technology that should be, cascaded in a broad net. It should be deliberate. It has certain place within the business. The $1 million question is, well, where exactly does it belong in the business, right?
Right.
Is it, this is going to be unique to the business. It's going to be unique to the fleet. Again, what are you trying to solve for? What is your objectives for your business outcomes? Is it to improve driver behavior? Is it just to improve efficiency or to improve fuel economy? Do you want to leverage AI for marketing? I mean, we see that fleets are using AI for making videos and making marketing content, for training. Is it, obvious for route optimization? So the question is, again, you have to be deliberate and intentional. Both Candy and Nicole used the term intention or intentional earlier. You need to focus on what you're really trying to improve. And this is just such a prime opportunity for fleets and others to experiment, and to experiment with intention, to work with dealers, to work with OEMs, to work with providers and suppliers of the industry. But you need to experiment with intention, and you need to get in, get out, and fail fast. But take the opportunity to experiment, but you got to do it with some intention.
I love that. I kind of picture a map without a compass. If you don't have the right
Yes.
intention, you're just going to keep wandering and going without ever really knowing if you're heading in the right direction. But with that intention, you actually have at least the general concept if you were going east or west, and if that was the right direction that your business needed to go for its individual needs, not what everybody else might be doing right now. Again, that balance that we were kind of talking about earlier. Nicole, what about you? What are you really seeing as a blind spot that could become a meaningful opportunity?
So I'm going to kind of summarize what these two amazing ladies said in a different way. And I'm going to use that as education. That is the blind spot. So as we talk about AI and being intentional, we got to be educated on what we need. And so we're able to utilize it and put it into motion. So a lot of people, we don't know what we don't know. And that's what's creating the blind spot. And so this is why we have to become educated if we're looking to grow, if we're looking to remain in the business, if we're looking to scale. Those are the things that are important. If we're going to, utilize AI, if we're going to use data sets to make decisions, a lot of us, again, don't know how. So that's where it leans back to education. And so being educated in multiple ways and just being open to understanding what we don't know and what's being implemented into the industry when it comes down to technology, telematics, etc. That's where I see the blind spot. And as an association, we've made it our mission to fill that void because we understand that small carrier doesn't want to remain a small carrier. They want to grow. And we want to help them understand that these are the things that you have to implement in order to survive and go to the next level in this industry.
Nicole, as a journalist, I feel that one in my heart, the need to educate and to help and to share all of that to help really just grow. Okay, so this is where I think it gets interesting because not everything always lines up as we've kind of been going through. Where do you ladies see the biggest disconnects happening right now between what the data says, what buyers are doing, and what operators are actually experiencing out there in the field? Nicole, I want to start with you on this one.
Sure. I will actually bring up something that Candy said when she was talking about dealers. Dealers having an opportunity for transparency. I wrote it down. Smart transparency was the word that Candy actually used. I want to use that and highlight there. The industry is interesting right now. So transparency is important, especially if we're educating those on the technologies that are part of commercial vehicles or systems or whatever we've implemented into our operations. So I think that if we have an opportunity to make sure that we I'm going to bring it back to education. I think that's where transparency is going to kind of come hand in hand with that. If we are just educating and we're providing the necessary information that gives that business owner or that fleet owner or whoever operator an opportunity to make a decision that's going to be beneficial for the organization with the more that they know. And the more that they've been provided to make an informed decision for the operation. I think that's going to be important. Plus, it'll build relationships, and that's what this business is about, building relationships. So if I can trust you, I can build with you, I can grow with you.
Now, relationships are becoming so much more important for that trust, that authenticity that people want to have that connection moving forward. And I also wrote down smart transparency on my notepad. Nice. That was a really good one. And speaking of the founder of that freight, Candy, what about you? What are you really seeing in this area as where that disconnection?
Yeah, so two things that you guys just triggered one, and that is the disconnect. We talk about all this data that we have, the telematics and things, but like for Nicole's community, when they're buying those, a lot of the over the road trucks and stuff, a lot of those are bought used, right? So having access to that data, that service data, that telematics data, I think brings a lot of transparency to that buyer for that huge investment that they're making into that truck, right? And I think that just bringing forth that data into that cycle is very important. For the disconnect, maybe marketplace, or speaking of inventory, I would say it's almost like an intelligence trap, right? So you pop up in your email and you're reading these national reports and they're saying this is happening and this is happening. But a buyer or fleet manager, they don't really care that class 4 availability is back to normal nationwide if they can't find that bucket truck within 300 miles, right? So it goes back to that, to be successful in politics, everything has to be local, right? It's the same way in business. Whatever's local. I was in the little networking sessions earlier, I was talking to, I would leave his name out because he might not want me to say his name. But I was talking to a gentleman, and we were talking about conversations and intelligence and how was he dealing with at a dealership level. And it's like, Candy, it's a different conversation every time because we have to ask a lot of the same questions, but we have to find where they're at in their business, right? And I think that that's real world operators out there, whether you're the business owner, the fleet manager, they're facing delays because the intelligence is just too broad a lot of the time. So wherever the point is, we need to bridge that gap between national trends and what the local business, right? Or the local dealer, the local demand, the local upfitter, whatever that reality is. I think that don't get caught up in the trap.
It's a good one. And Dania, what would you have to add? What are you seeing?
Well, I think I can offer a tangible example related to what Candy was talking about, where conversation with the dealers is different every time. And
Yeah.
and as Nicole talks about transparency, the smart transparency, that's related to expectations. So we conducted a very recent survey, again, around telematics. And while there is consensus that telematics offers tremendous benefits, right? Improved vehicle tracking and improved efficiency and utilization and routing and, predictive maintenance and all of that. What we saw in the survey was this gap between these are my priority benefits, such as I need to track my vehicles and I need to improve my utilization, to benefits actually experienced. And I'm looking at the data, I'm thinking, gosh, I really expected these percents to be higher. Depending on the benefit, for example, improved vehicle tracking, there's a handful of benefits that fleets were desiring. And the percentages of the benefit actually experienced was between 40 and 60%. And that just kind of caught me off guard. It's like, why is the percent not higher? Why is it more fleets are not saying I'm experiencing this benefit from my telematics technology? So that caught me off guard. I expected it to be higher. So there's this kind of disconnect between desired benefits and actually experienced benefits. So looking a little bit deeper, which we've heard before, is fleets would like more customization. So more customization in their reports, better dashboards, the data to be more relevant to them. So, perhaps less aggregation and more specialization to their business. There's also been complaints about they like to see it to be more real-time data, right? It's not that it's not real-time data, but depending on how often that data gets updated, there could be a lag. So when you're talking about route optimization and you're talking about identifying for your drivers where there may be construction or whatever. You want real-time data. So there's a desire to have that data updated a little bit more frequently, so it truly is real-time data in their definition, not what an IT definition is of real-time data. And then finally, there were complaints of, there's some errors and there's some inaccuracies in my telematics data. A lot of times that's related to missing data, but there is an opportunity to understand that disconnect. Again, I was surprised that more fleets were not reporting that they were actually experiencing these benefits that were so important to them. And then in a second area related to telematics, and this was a little bit surprising too, when we look at fleets, companies that are shopping for telematics solutions versus those companies that have actually adopted, there's a disconnect between many more shoppers are concerned about the cost of telematics, both the upfront and the ongoing cost, as well as the ROI. Not that adopters of telematics, so the folks that have hands-on experience, have been running telematics in their fleet, not that cost is completely absent, it's just much less prominent. So there appears to be this, and maybe it has to do with transparency, there appears to be this disconnect that there's an opportunity for telematics providers to articulate a value proposition that is going to resonate with a company that's in market, that they are going through the shopping and purchase process, that you need to be transparent, you need to be tangible, you need to be relevant to their business to communicate this value of telematics. And it's not about cost. It should never be about cost. It should always be about value, because once you're running it, there are benefits that are experienced. There are tremendous ROIs. So, there's a perception gap going on here. So that was another little disconnect that kind of caught our attention, that could be an opportunity just to communicate, educate a little bit better.
Yeah, no. Let's see. I think we got Nicole. Did you have anything you wanted to add to this one?
Yes, I want to kind of comment. When we were talking, when you made the comment about you were shocked that experience, I guess when it came down to the survey, that it was a little lower than expected. I can tell you that when it comes down to my community, and I hear the feedback when it comes down to the telematics, a lot of the operators or the owners or the carriers, small carriers, they're not sure. That's why they don't respond. They're not sure. They haven't really seen that ROI. They're still trying to figure out how it benefits them. I personally think that's where that transparency comes into play. It wasn't sold to them in a way that they understood how it could benefit their business or benefit or grow or increase their operation. So when they're seeing things like lag and real-time data, that's a bit of a turnoff. And so now they're like, I don't know how I feel. I'm not sure. And so that's been some of the feedback that I've received. And it's not that they don't want to be a part of the trends or a part of what's taking place. They just don't know how, and they don't feel like they got full education, full smart transparency when they made the decision to implement telematics into their operations.
Love it. So at the intro, I noted something that I know we can't talk about blind spots without touching on this one, which is cybersecurity. It continues to come up as a major blind spot from what I'm seeing, and I would love to hear from you ladies. Why do you think so many companies are still underprepared in this particular arena? Dania, let's start with you.
We have been talking to our FAH members about cybersecurity for probably a handful of years now. And the percent of companies that share they're not fully or completely confident that they could prevent or remediate in such an incidence of a cyber attack or a data breach. It's only about 20% of fleets saying, I'm completely confident we can deal with this. And that has not changed much. And it kind of gets worse. About 10% of companies share that we don't have any workflows in place to even deal with this. So and again, I kind of thought over time when we first started asking about this a handful of years ago, kind of thought, well, this will get better, right? There's been some significant high profile cyber attacks, both here in the US as well as in the UK, the JLR thing. I think that was last year in the fall. I expected it to get better. And it probably is, there's some biases with survey taking, of course, and, maybe you don't want to admit to all of that, but it's a lingering problem. And I have some hypothesis that in just the daily grind of business, on top of just trying to build your resilience against uncertainty and unpredictability, it just simply gets deprioritized. There's certainly recognition that is important. And, there's a little bit of a human behavior aspect to it too. If you haven't personally been impacted and your immediate circle has not been impacted, yes, there's been high visibility cases, but that's kind of like far off. It's this bias of, oh, it won't happen to me. So it's a combination of, both kind of internal regulatory human behavior kind of stuff on top of it just gets deprioritized.
That it won't happen to me until it does. Nicole, what would you have to add?
I'm gonna just keep it very fast and quick. I can understand that. When you use the word deprioritizing, we're moving so fast in our businesses. We're trying to build, we're trying to grow, we're trying to connect. And you're absolutely correct. You're like, we'll deal with it later. And dealing with it later sometimes comes at a huge cost before dealing with it now. If you don't have a CTO, chief technology officer, or don't have anyone that is able to start to implement those type of important features, I mean, cyber attacks are not to be played with. I've heard people holding somebody's business for ransom virtually, and they couldn't get into anything. If we're talking about growth and we're talking about expansion, please get serious about your back office, about attacks, about workflows, about putting things in place if and when something happened. Precautionary workflows are important, guys. And so I just want to really, really plead with those that are putting that in the back end, especially if you're talking about your business that has implemented technologies and telematics and all these amazing things that can be hacked. Okay. And boy, your data's gold. They know that. They want it. So please take your data seriously. And please, by all means, move forward with a CTO if you don't have one.
Now they're getting, so much more sophisticated. I think it used to be so obvious that the prince that's on the other line is not a prince asking you, it's a little bit easier to kind of see that. But now the phishing, the ability to just
their website.
Oh, look, from a colleague. It is so easy to fall for things now. So it is very important to have the right things in place. Candy, do you have anything that you want to add on the cybersecurity and why companies are still just underprepared right now?
Well, I think that, like you said, we have just assumed that they were going after the big guys, right? So when you're in your day to day, it's like, what do I have? I just got to worry about my business growing, and you're just deprioritizing it. But I think that it's a great time to bring it back under the microscope again, because AI and its ability to, automate phishing attacks that look and sound like a legit customer, like your best customer, right? So they're not just trying to break down your firewall, they're trying to trick your intelligence, your human intelligence. And if it's not talked about, it's not socialized, processes in place, then honestly, your security is just house of cards.
True story.
All right, ladies. You guys have given me so much perspective here. I hope the audience agrees. I want to close this out with a quick little round. What is one thing companies should start doing now to be better positioned for what you guys think is coming next? And we've got just a few minutes. So we're going to try to keep these a little quick. Nicole, what do you say?
Make sure you stay in the now by staying up to date with education. Get in the rooms with the people that are making the decisions and make sure you're listening and being a part of that. So that's just my little 1, 2, 2, 1.
Sandy, what about you?
I think it's going to come back again about inventory and strategy. Instead of it being a listing strategy for your inventory, it needs to be an intelligence strategy, right? Don't just post and broadcast your inventory. You want to activate that inventory, right? You want every spec, lift gate capacity, the interior dimensions. Make that data available because it might be in an intelligent buy-in system that's looking for fleet, not the fleet manager, right? It might be that. So if your data's not smart, it's not precise, it's not machine readable, then you're just losing not just a sale to a human, but you're potentially being filtered out of algorithms altogether.
Yeah. And Dania, what about you?
Yeah, to build upon what Candy just said about intelligence and good data, connected business is now the default, right? We're looking at more data. We're never going to be looking at less data. So those who treat data as a true company asset will gain an edge. And you need to be prepared, going back to what I said at the beginning, you need to be prepared to ask questions of your data. And so what questions do you know to ask to make confident and efficient decision making? Well, it goes back to what we talked about before with intention, right? You need to have objectives. You need to have KPIs. You need to have goals in mind. And those type of business planning metrics is second nature to the big guys, right? But as Nicole can probably attest to, your owner operators, your smaller fleets, they've become very successful in, I'm going to categorize it in a more casual way. But again, like I said, connected business is the default today. So we're going to benefit from this growing data ecosystem if we can use the intelligence to be able to leverage it into confident and effective decision making that ultimately impacts our business in a positive way. Companies are too busy. They don't have time to wade through data to figure out where they want to go or what decisions they want to make. You have to be prepared to ask questions of those data to be confident and effective moving forward in a just increasingly connected business world.
All right, folks. So hopefully you guys in the audience took some notes, but I've got a couple of keywords for everybody to pay attention to that I got. We got balance, intention, integration, smart transparency, and education. I think that's some of the things I want you guys all to take away. Thank you, Dania, Candy, Nicole, for sharing your insights today. I think the conversation made one thing really clear. It was that the biggest opportunities in this industry are not always the loudest ones. Often they're hiding in the signals that we miss, the assumptions we've not challenged, and those blind spots that we've not addressed. So what today's discussion showed is that when you connect data, buyer behavior, and real-world industry experience, you get a much clearer view of where this market is headed. So thank you all for joining us today.